The diplomatic station hung in the void like a jewel crown, orbiting a dying star that pulsed with a crimson heartbeat. The chamber was circular, walls lined with pulsing panels and floating hollow screens displaying ancient treaties, trade routes, and surveillance feeds. Representatives of 12 galactic species stood around a raised platform, their eyes, some multifaceted, some eyeless, some glowing with unknown energy, fixed on the center of the room where silence reigned. Then the human walked in, tall, angular, dressed in a suit of sleek black and gold armor that shimmered faintly with embedded tech. The diplomat moved with deliberate calm. Her platinum hair cascaded over one shoulder, and her pale, expressionless face was unreadable. The translation systems adjusted instantly to the quiet hum of her voice. "I am here to answer your summons." The Veil Theory delegation bristled, slender and sinuous, draped in living robes that shifted in color with their moods. They moved as a single unit. The tallest among them stepped forward. His voice cut through the chamber like sharpened glass. "You come as if unaware of the charges against your kind, as if your presence alone does not demand retribution." The human regarded him. She neither blinked nor bowed. "I am aware. I am unconcerned." A murmur stirred among the other representatives. The Avati clicked their mandibles, a sign of unease. The Kritha's gelatinous forms pulsed a pale orange, anxious. Even the Vorn, encased in armor grown from their bones, tilted their heads, considering the human with something between suspicion and respect. The Veil Theory leader hissed. 3 moons shattered on the horizon frontier. Our scouts destroyed. Your outposts move with military precision. Yet you call it exploration. You test the boundaries of every accord, and when confronted, this is your answer? Her gaze swept the chamber. You mistake caution for aggression. We expand to survive. That is our nature. But we have not attacked. Not yet. That final phrase lingered in the air like smoke. For the first time, a current of unease passed visibly through the chamber. The Grand Arbiter, a floating orb of bioneural tissue encased in crystal, pulsed with a soft blue light. Its tone was neutral, almost apologetic. Earth's envoy, the Council demands assurance. The Veil Theory demand punishment. What answer will you give to prevent war? I will give none, the human said simply, because this isn't negotiation. It's theater, and the script has already been written. Whispers turned to commotion. The Avati recoiled. The Krith oozed away from the platform's edge. Only the Vorn remained still, eyes glowing like coals under frost. The Veil Theory leader laughed, a sound like blades grinding, arrogant to the end. Do you think your silence will save you? The human stepped forward, her voice level. I don't think. I know. Outside the station, unseen by most, Veil Theory dreadnoughts repositioned. Plasma cannons powered up, their cores glowing like miniature suns. Orders had been given hours before the summit began. The human was to be eliminated, publicly, a message to Earth and all who might side with it. Inside, the floor beneath the human vibrated faintly. The Veil Theory delegation took one synchronized step back. Then, witness your final lesson, Terran. The human closed her eyes. 3 flashes lit up the viewport. Plasma cannons fired. Perfectly timed, perfectly aligned. A direct strike through the chamber's transparent dome. No shield would hold against that. It would vaporize her. But when the light faded, the human still stood. The energy dispersed around her like wind breaking against stone. Not a scratch marked the floor. Her armor had absorbed it, or something had. No one knew. No one spoke. She opened her eyes slowly. I came here to listen, she said. You chose to fire. A silence followed that no protocol could break. Even the Grand Arbiter dimmed its glow, as if uncertain how to proceed. In that stillness, the human turned and walked toward the viewport. Through it, the Veil Theory fleet hovered in disciplined formation. She stared out, expression unchanged. They fired plasma cannons. One delegate whispered to no one in particular. And the human didn't flinch, said another. Then everything changed. The station structural alarms hadn't even registered the plasma strike. Whatever had stopped it, it had done so cleanly. No debris, no shockwave, No afterburn. Just silence. The human stood with her back to the assembly, gazing out into the void as if the Veil Theory fleet beyond a glass were nothing more than a passing curiosity. Her arms were still at her sides, posture relaxed, but the tension in the chamber had thickened like storm-heavy air. No one moved. The Veil Theory leader's composure cracked first. His voice trembled at the edges. "What trick is this?" She didn't answer immediately. When she turned, her gaze settled not just on him, but on all of them, each delegation, each species with its own history of dominance, diplomacy, or fear. Her expression was unreadable. You expected a demonstration of weakness. You received a reminder. The Avati whispered among themselves in their clicking tongue. The Krith pulsed violently, unsettled by a silence that even now held. The Vorn did not whisper. One of them, ancient and tall, stepped forward and regarded the human with something approaching respect. That strike was calibrated to breach starship hulls. "You stood at ground zero." "Correct," she replied. The Veil Theory turned sharply. "You are not invincible." "No," she agreed. "I'm not, but I am prepared." The Grand Arbiter stirred. "Your shielding technology surpasses Council-registered limits. That alone constitutes a breach." "That," she said, voice calm, "was not shielding." They didn't ask what it was. They didn't want the answer. It was enough to see it had worked. Enough to see that, despite the best weapons one of the galaxy's oldest powers could bring to bear, the human hadn't flinched. "You came here to provoke war," she continued, addressing the Veil Theory now. "You planned the attack before this session was called. Your intent wasn't diplomacy, it was spectacle. And what?" The Veil Theory leader growled. "Do you think you are now? A martyr who failed to die." She stepped off the platform and onto the floor, her boots echoing softly. "No, I'm the line you didn't know existed." Every eye followed her as she passed through the center of the chamber, the same path she'd walked moments before, now changed by the shadow of violence. Her armor gleamed softly, but she carried no weapon. Her strength was something else. Quiet, unshakable, forged in the unseen crucible of Earth's own brutal history. "You misunderstand us," she said without turning. "You think we reach outward because we are ambitious. You think our silence is fear. You think our restraint is a weakness to exploit." She stopped near the base of the Veil Theory delegation, meeting their leader's eyes. "You think if you strike hard enough, we'll fall. But humans don't fall. We endure." The Veil Theory took a step back. Not out of fear, at least not fear of her alone, but fear of what she represented, of the unknown quantity humanity had become. For centuries, Earth had been dismissed as a fringe world, its people regarded as unpredictable anomalies. This moment turned myth into certainty. "We faced extinction," she said, voice quiet now, but every syllable landing like the drop of a blade. "On our own world, we warred ourselves into near ruin. We survived pandemics, poisoned skies, the slow suffocation of our oceans. We clawed back from the edge not because we were led, but because we refused to be erased." A hush settled over the chamber, the kind that made time feel suspended. She gestured toward the viewport, without looking. "That wasn't your worst, and it wasn't our best." "You threaten us now," the Veil Theory hissed. "No," she replied, soft as breath. "I don't have to." And with that, she returned to the center, turned to face the entire assembly once more. The human stood not as an emissary of peace nor a harbinger of war, but as something else entirely. Proof. The Grand Arbiter finally spoke. "This session is suspended. The Council must reconvene privately." No one objected. Even the Veil Theory knew there was no recovered momentum after a failed execution. Their weapons had spoken and been ignored. The human nodded once, then moved toward the exit. As she passed the Vorn representative, he inclined his head slightly, a rare gesture among his kind. "You are not like the others," he said. "I know," she replied without stopping. The chamber doors opened, and she vanished beyond them. In the silence that followed, something new took root, not fear, exactly, not yet, but caution, deep and sharp. For the first time, the galaxy realized it did not understand humanity at all. and the human had only just begun to speak. Beyond the chamber, the corridor was silent save for the rhythmic hum of life support systems embedded deep within the station's alloyed bones. The human walked alone, each step steady, each breath measured. There were no guards, no escorts. None were needed. She reached the observation wing, an arc of transparent alloy that overlooked the dying star. The orange-red giant swelled in slow agony, casting long shadows across her armor. She stood motionless, gaze fixed, as if the burning mass beyond the glass mirrored something within her. A soft chime preceded the appearance of a communication node on the wall. A face shimmered into view, a fellow human, older, marked with cybernetic interfaces across his temple. General Karen. His tone was level, though the strain in his eyes betrayed concern. "You're still standing. That wasn't part of their plan." "They hoped I wouldn't be," she replied. "That was their real message. The rest was performance." He studied her in silence. "Was it the suit?" "No," her voice dropped. "It was me." Karen looked away briefly, nodding to someone off-screen before continuing. "Command want an update. Do we escalate?" She didn't answer immediately. Her reflection on the glass merged with the distorted image of the star, a specter of power wrapped in silence. "They're not ready to understand us," she said, "and we're not ready to teach them gently." Karen exhaled through his nose. "You always did talk like a philosopher before a fight." She turned her head slightly. "And you always did mistake silence for peace." The line went dead. Behind her composed exterior, her thoughts twisted deeper. The truth wasn't in the council chamber, nor even in the threat that loomed from the Veil Theory. It lived elsewhere, buried in the decisions that had made her what she was. Humanity had not simply evolved. It had been shaped, bent by pressure no other species had endured. Long before her appointment as Earth's envoy, she had been part of Project Threshold, a covert initiative born out of desperation. The Terran Alliance, outnumbered and outgunned, had needed more than weapons. They needed individuals who could walk into a chamber of ancient powers and remain unbroken. Not just soldiers. Symbols. She remembered the induction, the months of neural reprogramming, the sensory deprivation, the memory compression algorithms. How they'd stripped away fear impulse by impulse until there was nothing left to paralyze, only awareness and choice. And before all that, the Catalyst, her home, a colony on Ganymede, reduced to ice and silence by a rogue mining conglomerate during an unauthorized resource grab. The Terran government hadn't intervened. There were no reparations. Just a line in a report, a closed file, and her mother's voice trapped in a corrupted final transmission. Pain had done what science could not. It had burned out hesitation. Now, she carried that void like a shield. The door behind her opened, footsteps soft and hesitant. It was a Zerati observer, young by his species standard, all flowing robes and translucent skin veined with bioluminescence. He approached with care, eyes wide but not afraid. "You did not react to the strike," he said. "You didn't even move." She didn't respond. "Was it faith?" he asked. "In your technology?" Her voice came after a pause. "No. In your people?" Another pause. "Not always." "Then what?" She looked at him, her eyes colder than the void outside. "In choice." The Zerati tilted his head, puzzled. "Choice. To stand still. To absorb. To respond only when it matters. That is what your council cannot grasp. They think strength is in force. But true power lies in what we choose not to do." He studied her a moment longer, then nodded slowly, as if trying to understand something written in a language he had only begun to learn. "You were made for this moment," he said. She didn't argue, didn't confirm or deny, only turned back to the stars. Across the galaxy, transmissions surged. Footage of the Veil Theory strike and its failure circulated among military channels, rebel networks, and planetary feeds. Systems that had once ignored Earth now asked different questions. What kind of species absorbs a plasma cannon blast and keeps walking? What kind of people raise a diplomat who doesn't flinch? In the quiet chamber, the human stood alone but not untouched. A tide had begun to shift, slowly, almost imperceptibly, but it moved. The Veil Theory had tried to silence her. Instead, they'd amplified her, and she wasn't done speaking. The storm came not with missiles, but with silence. Within 36 hours of the Council summit, the Veil Theory withdrew from all scheduled diplomatic meetings. Their fleets repositioned, discreetly at first, then openly. Borders once maintained by fragile agreement bristled with weapon signatures. Trade routes darkened. Communications were suddenly encrypted with layers of code the Council hadn't seen in centuries. But they did not speak of war. Not yet. The human envoy, still unnamed in official records, remained on the station. She made no announcements, gave no interviews. And yet, her image, standing tall in the wake of a plasma blast, became the symbol of something larger than any statement she could offer. Her quarters were spare. No ornaments, no comfort furniture, just function. She sat at a narrow console, eyes scanning a tactical map of the outer systems. Red flares marked potential flashpoints. Yellow streaks represented uncertain allegiances. Blue dots, her allies, were too few and too scattered to matter. Not yet. The door chimed. This time, she answered. A tall figure entered, cloaked in iridescent fibers that refracted light like water. It was Rin Seraph, the Vorn diplomat. Not a warrior, but descended from them, bred in a caste culture that revered history and foresight above all. He bowed low. "You didn't call for me," he said. "I didn't need to." He straightened. "You anticipated the shift?" They would rather escalate than admit failure. That makes them predictable. He studied her, his gaze distant. "You provoke fear. I provoke truth." There was a beat of silence. The star beyond the station continued to die slowly, its last centuries unwinding in molten pulses. Sarah stepped closer. "There are some among the Vorn who believe your kind has crossed a threshold, that you no longer evolved biologically but ideologically, that you've shaped your identity through confrontation. Maybe—" She leaned back. "But we've never sought confrontation. We've responded to it. We didn't survive our planet to dominate others. We survived because we didn't have the option to surrender." He nodded, slow and deliberate. "And what now?" "Now we wait." "For what?" "For them to blink." Elsewhere, in a black site buried beneath the crust of a council moon, the Veil Theory Supreme Strategist Vel Etten addressed his war council. Holograms shimmered. Star charts expanded and collapsed with a flick of his fingers. His voice was cold and quiet. "She is not a soldier," he said. "She is a weapon. They say she's augmented. One general offered. No, augmentation doesn't explain it. What we saw, what our fleet felt, wasn't mechanical. It was will." They shifted uncomfortably. Vel Etten rarely indulged in abstraction. "We spent centuries cataloging species' responses to trauma. Patterns, behaviors, thresholds. But humans—" He gestured to the screen, replaying the summit moment again. "They are not shaped by logic. They are shaped by defiance. And if they retaliate, they won't." "You're certain?" Vel Etten's voice darkened. "Yes, because she is still there. And as long as she is still there, standing, watching, we cannot risk the first move. Not again." On the station, a private communique pulsed softly at the edge of the envoy's screen. She opened it. One sentence, encrypted with a Terran cipher. "Authorization granted." She stared at it. No reaction crossed her face. But inside, something shifted, something deliberate. She stood, dismissed the map, sealed the room. She made her way down into the lower levels of the station, past layers most diplomats never saw. The emergency access hatches led into a chamber she had visited only once before. Upon her arrival, there, in the center of the darkened room, stood a monolith, blacker than shadow, etched with Terran code no one else could read. A beacon if activated. Not for reinforcements, not for rescue, but for revelation. She placed her hand on its surface. The monolith responded with a pulse of violet light. Systems awakened. Old, hidden, dangerous. From across the galaxy, Terran signals stirred. Long-dormant AIs recalibrated. Ghost fleets, hidden in asteroid fields and solar shadows, came online. Not to strike, but to stand visible. Not a threat, a promise. And for the first time in centuries, the Veil Theory Council received a broadcast they could not trace, could not decode, and could not ignore. A human voice. Calm. Familiar. You fired. I endured. Now I watch. She stepped back from the monolith. In her reflection, she saw not a warrior nor a symbol. She saw someone who had stopped waiting for understanding. The galaxy would not bend to words, but it might pause for certainty. And in that pause, everything could change.